The gentlewoman yields back. The gentlewoman from Oklahoma and the chair of the Subcommittee on Modernization, Ms. Bice, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the witnesses for being here. I want to piggyback off of what my colleague, Representative Sewell, just mentioned. You know, she's right. This should not be a partisan issue, but I think it has become that due to the lack of engagement from the Republican side during the last Congress, where I was a freshman member, as the John Lewis Voting Rights Act was pushed forward. There was no engagement from the Republican side, no even input or discussion, and that does make it difficult. So I agree with you. We should have more dialogue on this issue. I want to start with Mrs. Nuruddin. Thank you so much for your son's service and for your service to your community. I want to thank you for explaining the challenges that you face during the 2020 election honestly. And that's really why we have Senate Bill 202 and also the ACE Act being put forward. Ranking Member Morelli suggested earlier, and I think Representative Sewell as well, that there was voter suppression by race in the 2022 election due to the passage of Senate Bill 202. Would you agree with this assessment? Can you make sure to hit your, there you go.
Doing that, sorry guys.
It's okay.
I think that the struggles that impact families who are living in perpetual poverty, I think that Senate Bill 202 didn't change the reality for those voters.
Did they expand early ballot access? Was the time early voting expanded with Senate Bill 202?
It was, I think the Saturday and Sunday was added maybe, or was it there before? Well, yeah.
Okay.
So the Saturday was optional before, but now it's required for federal elections, and Sunday is optional based on a superintendent.
So we've actually expanded the ability, the number of days that individuals have to vote. Dr. Reith, do you want to comment on that at all?
No, just I agree.
Agree. Okay.
That's true.
Thank you.
Sunday is optional.
Sure. Ms. Willard, I want to follow up on Mr. Carey's line of questioning. You mentioned that you received no federal funding, very little state funding. How are you funding your operations? Are you taking any money from outside entities to help run these elections?
We've not, since I've been on the board. They might have prior to 2020, but not in the last 3 years.
So how are you funding your operations?
Local county taxpayers pay the operations fully.
Okay. You also mentioned, and I think it's important to note this, that there are geographical challenges with Fulton County. And I just thought it was an interesting sort of perspective here. So I looked it up. And you may be surprised to know that Fulton County is 534 square miles. Oklahoma County, my home county, is 718 square miles. We don't have ballot boxes at all. We have no fault absentee ballots, where you have to have an absentee ballot notarized before you send it back in. We have voter ID laws on the books, but we also can determine the night of the elections who has won. And so I'm not sure that the geographical size of the county matters. It's really how these elections are being administered that make the huge difference. And I think it's an important point to note. One of the tenets of the ACE Act is cleaning up the voter rolls. And I maybe want to ask Mr. Spiskowski, who do you think in the U.S. is doing voter maintenance well in the United States? What states are doing well?
Well, the easiest way to find out who's doing it well and who's not is to check the election integrity scorecard that the Heritage Foundation premiered in December of 2021, in which we rate every single state based on best practices.
Do you think that states like California that have decided to do mail-in balloting to everyone, and I think we've talked here, I think it even happened recently in some other states.
Well, I'll tell you, on voter registration maintenance, California is one of the worst states in the country, so is Nevada. Some of the best states in the country are places like Texas, Georgia, Florida, but you can see our ratings. I will tell you this. We scored states based on a perfect score of 100. No state in the country scored 100. The highest state was in the low 80s. The worst states would have flunked out of college. Their scores were so low.
I think just the last point I want to make is that's why this particular piece of legislation is so important. We want to improve the process. We want to make sure that we have accurate, reliable, trustworthy elections at the end of the day, and this legislation aims to do that very thing. So thank the witnesses for being here. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Gentleman yields back.